What's good, innies? Welcome to week 7 of season 2 and what might be the most cinematic episode yet. This one is called Chikhai Bardo, and this time we're dealing with a character we've heard a lot about but haven't really met yet. Gemma is front and center this time, and we're going to experience the story of how and why Gemma ended up at Lumon. Now, there are more than a few big reveals in this episode, and even more disturbing facts than you probably could have imagined. They did promise us more Lumon backstory this season, and this episode definitely delivers. Before we begin, a massive shout out to the entire tinfoil gang, and a special shout out to these fine specimens, the executive producers of the show. And with that, I'd like to welcome the newest members. Meg, the UUR, I like that one. ASCII Genitals, that sounded like a question. Bunny D, Knuckle, Soft Castle McCormick, I see what you did there. Hokey Knight, Drool, Lisa C, Bo Hawkwater, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, and Tottenham Till I Die. Thank you so much for choosing to support what I do here, and I hope you enjoy seeing your names in the closing credits of every video going forward. Alright gang, I hope you're packing the heavy duty tinfoil this time. You might need it, because it's time to dive. Chekai Bardo starts things off on the day that Gemma apparently first met Mark at the university, well before any of the madness we've experienced has taken place. Now, right away, we're given reasons to be suspicious when we spot the Lumon teardrop logo on the machinery in the shot, and this lets us know that Lumon is behind the blood drive that these two are taking part in. We could be looking at one of the ways that Lumon finds candidates for their projects. For all we know, this might be the day they took notice of Gemma as a potential target. After a clever transition, we're with current day Gemma, and she's being attended to by a nurse whose job seems to mainly involve monitoring her. The woman seems interested in Gemma's thoughts and feelings for the most part. When she asks her what she's been thinking about, based on her response, it becomes clear that this is not Miss Casey, but this is the real Gemma. Speaking of Mark, in the last episode we saw Audi Mark right after he upgraded his reintegration package with Dr. Agabi, and things didn't go quite as planned. Now Mark is passed out on the couch with a worried Devin questioning Agabi about the situation. Agabi reassures her that Gemma is alive and that Mark wanted to reintegrate himself in order to find her. He's never going to leave this couch the entire episode, but a lot of what we learn will come from his memories as well as Gemma's. Okay, so now we're back on the testing floor, and we get some more shots of Gemma with this nurse, and she's still asking her questions that seem to be aimed at assessing her severed state, but she also asks her a very odd question. If she was caught in a mudslide, would she be more afraid of suffocating or drowning? Now, based on the sudden spike on this device that she's looking at when she gives this answer, this is supposed to mean something to her, or perhaps one of her many severed states, a fact that we learn early on in this episode. But this isn't our first rodeo, and these writers never waste a line, so this has to be important. Now, Gemma asks, how many rooms today? To which the woman replies, 6. And then a disappointed looking Gemma gets up and puts on a prescribed outfit before she's led to another door. Now it's on the way to the door that we begin to spot the dozens of what look like tiny rooms with labels on them that correspond to the file names that MDR have been working on. So what's going on here? So Gemma seems to be doing this room thing pretty often, like it's her entire purpose for being down here. The door she does enter is called Wellington, and as soon as she's inside, we witness her switch over to an innie state, and we start to hear that familiar whistle tune that we heard from the man in the elevator that picks up supplies from O&D. It's the same creepy guy, being played by Robbie Benson, and he's trying to behave like this is a typical visit to the dentist, and it clearly is not. So in this scene, we learn that for this particular innie, her entire existence consists of dental visits with this creep. Severance is touted as the solution to dealing with many of the unpleasant aspects of everyday life, and this scenario could be one that Lumon is testing on Gemma's innie. They're clearly running this because dental visits can be an anxiety-inducing thing for a lot of people, so it might be a good stress test for her severed state. Either way, this dude seems to have the hots for Gemma. That much is clear. When the scenario's over and she leaves the room, she's turned back into her Audi state, and the nurse asks her if she remembers anything. So they're checking for memory leaks. So next, we're back with Audi Mark, and he's having his own adventure as we dive back into some of his pleasant memories with Gemma. Now from this sequence, we learned that they were married, relatively happy, and had plans to have a child. Gemma successfully got pregnant, and things were looking up until we learned that she had a miscarriage. An event that took a toll on their relationship and was probably the event that sent Gemma down the path that led to her own kidnapping. But before we go any further, we gotta talk about this. This is the shot in the episode when Mark is recalling his time with Miss Casey, that time when she came to MDR to observe Gemma. We get another perspective on this moment. So in this sequence, the camera follows the cables from the MDR computer to a room directly below them. In this room, there are 4 computers, each corresponds to one of the MDR stations, and each has a worker who appears to be monitoring and logging the actions of their assigned MDR member. This has been happening the entire time. Also note that each person looks somewhat like one of the members of MDR. Not the first time we've seen this. Think back to the Ortbo experience. In that episode, the creepy, bizarro, clone-like doppelgangers were being used by Lumon as signposts to direct them towards that cave. So are these supposed to be some kind of clone? One last thing, notice that in these shots of the screen, we can see that the Cold Harbor file was actively being worked on all the way back in season 1, while Miss Casey was on the 7th floor with MDR. Now, Drummond makes an appearance along with the creepy Dr. Maurer guy, and there are a few things to take note of here also. Drummond asks if the Severance barrier is holding up, letting us know that the purpose of these tests is related to the testing of the resilience of the Severance chip under stress. Drummond also suggests that Dr. Maurer likes Gemma, confirming that he's definitely being creepy, but it also might suggest that this isn't the first person that they've done this to. There might have been other test subjects down here who didn't quite meet the mark. Pardon the pun. So, for some reason, Gemma is special. It could be that she is the closest they've come to a perfectly severed state by their own metric, or maybe she's been successfully severed more times than most. As we're gonna find out, she's got a few versions of herself out there. Also, note that Drummond seems to imply that Gemma will be deleted once her purpose with the company has been fulfilled. So in the next scene, we find out that Gemma and Mark did not give up after her miscarriage, and that they went to an IV clinic to try again. Note that the doctor makes an appearance in this shot. This ties into the theory that while Lumon does choose their recruits, they use a form of inception, convincing the target that it was their own decision to join. Lumon might be working in the background to manipulate things to create the circumstances needed to quietly nudge a would-be recruit into their open arms. Also, Lumon being in the pharmaceutical game does give them plenty of opportunities to find people that fit their criteria and influence them. So now we're back with Gemma again. She's being questioned by the doctor again about her feelings after exiting the rooms to see if there are any residual emotions leaking. But she brings up the Cold Harbor room, stating that it's the only room she hasn't been inside of yet, and also that it didn't have a name until recently. Judging by Dr. Maurer's cryptic response, the idea is that she isn't ready for this room yet, but it's essential to the project. So that leaves a few obvious possibilities as to why this might be the case. The most popular theory is that Lumon needs Gemma because they see the potential to accomplish something they've found unattainable until now. Given what we know so far, we can make some good guesses as to what that might be. It appears that Lumon wants to create multiple severed states in a person, each with a particular unpleasant part of that life assigned to them, freeing the original psyche from all forms of pain and suffering, including the pain of death itself. This could be Lumon's take on the concept of enlightenment by trying to create a pain-free existence. Another possible explanation is that they are looking for the purest severed state possible as a prototype or mold for future severed people. Or it could be a combination of the two things. Whatever Cold Harbor is, it's not good for Gemma, and when the doctor says that she will see the world and the world will see her, he's not being literal. Now back in the real world, Devin and Dr. Ragabi have another conversation because they're still unsure about Mark's condition, and she starts floating the idea of calling Harmony Cobell, but Ragabi insists that this is a bad idea, one that will force her to leave if she follows through with it. She also says something interesting that confirms a theory about Cobell when she remarks that Lumon raised her, referring to her as a soldier for the company. So the next scene is where the episode gets its namesake. It looks like Gemma's filling out some sort of exam questionnaire test thingy sent by the clinic that they're no doubt using to search for new targets. The funny thing is, they sent her the same ideographic cards that Dylan yoinked from O&D back in season 1. What a strange coincidence. Now, Gemma's take on the card is that it represents ego death, a letting go of the self. But the term Chikhai Bardo refers to one of 6 transitional states that consciousness passes through, not only at death but also during life and meditation, according to Buddhism. This particular state occurs at the precise moment of physical death, when the consciousness separates from the body. During this stage, the individual is said to experience the clear light of ultimate reality or the ground luminosity, which represents the true nature of mind and the opportunity for enlightenment. It seems that this entire episode might be likened to a Chikhai Bardo moment for Mark, in that by means of his reintegration, his old self and his innie self are dying, and it's at this time that he has an opportunity to break from the cycle and find enlightenment, as it were. The same could be said of Gemma in a manner of speaking. Although in her case, the Chikhai Bardo moment might be realized when she finally steps into that cold harbor room. Anyway, this scene shows us just how distant the two have become. This is the result of the emotional strain that trying to have a baby and failing has put on them. But there is also a clear indication that part of Mark's coping style involves him being a jerk, which definitely doesn't help. Every scenario that we see Gemma's innie forced into is a high stress one, like a plane ride that seems destined to crash, or it seems designed specifically for her, like the Christmas card notes that she had to write after we already learned that she hates writing those. So our creepy Dr. Mauer friend pays Gemma a visit for another assessment. Now when Gemma says she wants to leave, Mauer lies to her, telling her that Mark moved on and that she should do the same. It's at this moment that we really start to recognize the fact that she doesn't really have a choice in any of this. She's being kept prisoner, which explains why she goes upside his head with a chair in the next shot before making her way for the exit. I don't know why, but I allowed myself to get a little excited here, thinking she might actually escape. What was I thinking? We were harshly reminded of how screwed Gemma is when she finally gets onto the elevator, only to have her Miss Casey persona take over right before she runs into Milchick, a slightly winded Milchick I might add, who definitely hustled out here to make the interception. As this is happening, we get to see Mark's last moments with Gemma. She apparently went out that night and Mark was supposed to be with her, but he chose to stay home to get some work done instead. We don't actually get to see the supposed accident, so we can't confirm if there even was one. We only see the police who showed up to notify next of kin. So there's no details on how it all went down, but Mark says he saw her burnt remains and was supposedly given said remains in a previous episode. The final scene shows Mark waking up finally, and when Devin asks him where he was, he flashes back to Gemma right away. Now this episode left me with a lot to think about, and I'm sure it left you with a lot to think about too. One of the main questions that I still can't seem to let go of is, if the files are all related to specific rooms on the testing floor, and we know that each room is a scenario experienced by Gemma or whomever the test subject is, then can we assume that the refiners are taking the results from those experiences and detecting and removing emotional responses deemed useless by Lumon? Is this what refining actually is? Removing the impurities, leaving behind a perfect, clean slate, so to speak. At the end of the day, what does Lumon actually want? Given what we've seen in the process, an emotionless, docile servant would be the result. Kinda sounds like what Miss Casey was, or better yet, what Miss Huang is right now. Something to think about. Anyway, that is all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you already know what to do. We're gonna be on week 10 in no time. Looking forward to those theory videos. Be kind to yourself and to others, and until next time, off you go.